There you are, love. Come in, come in. I've just put the kettle on, and there's a little plate of shortbread here, if you'd like a bite. You know me. I can't help but fuss over you a bit when you visit. It makes my heart glad to see you at the door, cheeks touched pink by the weather outside. Sit yourself down by the fire. It's been burning steady all afternoon, just the way I like it. There's a chair pulled up close with a knitted blanket ready if you should feel a chill. Isn't it a lovely thing to pause a while? The world is always rushing and tumbling along, but in here, time has its own gentle pace. The clock ticks softly in the corner, the flames pop and sigh, and if you listen closely, you can almost hear the night air pressing against the window panes. It's a simple kind of comfort, but I think those are the best kinds, don't you? Now, I was just thinking, as I laid out those biscuits, how many little memories I've collected over the years. Like treasures in a box, tucked away until the right moment brings them back again. Some are bright and shining, others soft and faded around the edges. But they all carry me to places I thought I'd nearly forgotten. Funny how that works. The smell of damp earth, or the call of a bird outside. And suddenly, I'm back in another time entirely. That's what I thought we might do tonight, you and I. We'll sit together in the quiet, let those memories unfold. Some will be about the wild things that shared the countryside with me. Foxes slipping through the dusk, mushrooms hiding under fallen leaves, birds' eggs gleaming in secret nests. Others will be about the trees and flowers that shape the seasons of my life. And all of them, in one way or another, are tied up with the feeling of being close to the land, of knowing its rhythms, its gifts, and its mysteries. So settle in, dear one. The tea is nearly ready, and I'll pour us both a cup before long. Let's let the evening stretch out like an old quilt, patch by patch, story by story. And perhaps, as I wander through these remembrances, you'll find yourself drifting with me to fields and hedgerows, to gardens and hidden corners of the woods. Where shall we begin? Ah, yes, with the fox. I can still see it now, as clear as if it were yesterday. There was a stretch of countryside near where I grew up, a patch of field bordered by tall grasses and a line of crooked gums, and it always seemed to belong to that fox. I would walk the same path most afternoons, the air filled with the hum of cicadas, and if I was quiet enough, I'd catch sight of him slipping along the edge of the trees. He never came too close, of course. Foxes are wary creatures, clever as they come, always watching with bright eyes that weigh you up in an instant. He had a coat the color of autumn leaves, deep russet with a soft pale underside, and when the sun caught it, he looked almost aflame against the shadows. There was something proud in the way he moved, light-footed and sure, as though he knew every root and hollow of that land better than anyone ever could. I'd stop sometimes and just watch him. He had no reason to fear me, and yet he always kept that careful distance, slipping in and out of sight, part shadow, part flame. There were days when I wondered if he was real at all, or just a spirit of the woods, showing himself only to those who cared enough to notice. Once, I remember, the morning mist was still hanging low across the field, turning every cobweb into lace, and there he was, standing quite still in the haze. He lifted his head, nose twitching, as though he could smell my presence from across the way. We locked eyes for the briefest of moments. I could feel my breath catch, as though I were being weighed and measured by something older and wiser than myself. Then, quick as a blink, he was gone, swallowed by the fog. I suppose he taught me something without meaning to, that the wild is not ours to tame, only to share for a while. The fox belonged to himself, to the grasses and the shadows, to the night hunts and the hidden dens. And yet, in watching him, I felt part of that world too, part of a story that ran deeper than my own small life. There were nights I would hear him as well, a sharp bark carried on the wind, sometimes close, sometimes far away. It had a lonely sound to it, though not unhappy. Just a reminder that another life was moving quietly alongside ours. I would lie awake, listening through the stillness, and picture him padding through the fields, tail low, eyes glinting under the moon. One evening, on my way home from school, I caught sight of him again. This time, he was trotting along the fence line, something dangling from his mouth. A rabbit, I think. Nature can be cruel, but it can also be fair. The fox had his place, just as the rabbit had its own. It reminded me that life out there was always in balance, even when it seemed harsh to our eyes. It became almost a game for me, scanning the fields each day to see if he was there. Sometimes he was, sometimes he wasn't, but the possibility of him kept my eyes sharp and my heart light. To this day, whenever I see a fox, even if only in a book or a painting, I feel that same thrill in my chest, the memory of a russet coat flickering through the grass. I often wonder if it was the same fox every time, or if there were several that passed through those fields. In my mind, though, it was always him, the same clever creature, keeping pace with my growing up years, teaching me patience, quietness, and respect for things beyond my reach. Funny how one animal can settle into your memory so firmly. Perhaps it's because I was young and everything seemed sharper then. Or perhaps it's because he was the first wild creature that truly made me feel like the countryside was alive, filled with eyes that watched and little lives that went on, whether we noticed or not. And you know, thinking of him now, it brings back the smell of the damp grass underfoot, the crunch of fallen leaves, the way the evening sky would glow pink and gold before sinking into indigo. The fox was part of all of that, part of the landscape, part of the memory, part of me. Sometimes I wish I could take you there, to that very field, so you could see him too. But then again, perhaps it is better this way. He belongs to the memory, to the hush of those afternoons when I stood still and waited, heart racing, eyes scanning the tree line. It is a gift you only receive once, and you carry it with you forever. And speaking of gifts from the woods, that fox often made me think of other treasures nature would leave tucked away, if only you knew how to look for them. One of my favorites was hunting for wild mushrooms. That was a whole adventure in itself, and a lesson in patience and care. Oh, what a joy it was. A little risky too, mind you, because not every mushroom is a friend. You had to know what you were looking for, or else you could end up with a sore belly, or worse. But that was part of the magic, the way the forest floor seemed to hide secrets just for those who paid attention. I remember walking along a damp earth after a night of rain, the smell of soil rich and heavy, and spotting the first little caps pushing through the moss. Sometimes they looked like tiny umbrellas, sometimes like pale buttons scattered in the grass. The thrill of bending low and brushing away leaves to find a perfect cluster never faded. Each one felt like a discovery, as though the woods were offering me a gift. Of course, we were taught early which ones to leave well alone. My mother was strict about that. She would say, "Don't you ever put anything in your basket unless you're sure." So I learned to watch, to study the colors, the gills, the stems, and the way they grew. There were safe ones that tasted earthy and rich in a stew, and there were others you wouldn't dare touch. I suppose it taught me caution, the kind that serves you well in life beyond the woods. I can still picture the basket I carried. It was a small wicker one, the handle smooth, shiny from use, and inside we'd line it with a bit of cloth. There was something so satisfying about the sound of a mushroom cap settling in among the others, soft and muffled, as though they were meant to belong there. By the time we were done, the basket would smell of damp leaves, moss, and that unmistakable mushroom scent, earthy and deep. One day stands out clear as crystal. I was maybe 12, old enough to wander a little further on my own. The rain had been steady all week, and the ground was alive with growth. I walked to a grove of old trees, their roots twisting like knotted ropes, and there I found them. The biggest mushrooms I'd ever seen, clustered in a circle like some secret fairy ring. Their caps were broad and brown, smooth as leather, and the stems thick and sturdy. I stood there for the longest time, just staring, almost afraid to pick them in case they vanished like a dream. When I finally did gather a few, I brought them home with such pride. My mother inspected them, nodding slowly, and declared them safe. That evening we sliced them and cooked them with butter and garlic, and the taste was heavenly. I don't think I've ever forgotten that meal. Every bite carried the damp coolness of the forest, the thrill of the hunt, and the warmth of home all at once. There were times, too, when I came home empty-handed, and that was a lesson in itself. You can't always find what you're looking for, no matter how hard you search. The forest gives what it chooses when it chooses. On those days, I'd walk back with muddy boots and a hungry belly, but never really disappointed, because the search was its own reward, teaching patience, teaching me to notice the little things along the way. The snail trails on leaves, the flash of a bird darting overhead, the way the light filtered green through the canopy. Mushrooming also carried with it a touch of old superstition. People would whisper about fairy circles, about spirits that guarded the mushrooms. Some said if you stepped inside a ring, you might never come out again. As a child, that made my heart race. I would bend to pick a mushroom and imagine tiny eyes watching from the shadows. But rather than frightening me, it filled me with wonder. It made the woods feel alive, enchanted, filled with mysteries just out of reach. Even now, whenever I catch that damp, earthy smell after rain, I'm pulled straight back to those foraging days. My knees may not be as eager to bend, and my eyes not quite as sharp to spot a cap among the leaves, but the memory does the work for me. I can feel the weight of the basket, hear the rustle of the trees, and taste the richness of those mushrooms sizzling in the pan. It taught me, I think, to appreciate the hidden treasures of life. Not everything is laid out in plain sight. Some things you have to kneel down, brush away the debris, and look closely for. And when you find them, oh, what joy! The small, quiet joys often turn out to be the ones that stay with you longest. Speaking of small treasures hidden away, I'm reminded of another kind of search from those days. This one carried even more excitement, because what we were looking for felt delicate, precious, and a little bit forbidden. I'm talking about finding bird eggs tucked away in nests where only the patient and careful could spot them. And just as the mushrooms taught me to look close to the ground, the birds taught me to look upward into branches, hedges, and hollows where new life was quietly waiting. I would move softly, careful not to disturb, my eyes searching for the faintest hints of a nest tucked where you least expected it. Some were easy to spot, woven boldly in the crook of a branch. Others were hidden with such cleverness that you'd walk past them a dozen times before noticing. I remember the robins most of all. Their nests were sturdy little bowls of grass and twigs, sometimes lined with soft mud, built low in shrubs or tucked in the fork of an oak branch. And the eggs, that clear, unforgettable blue. Not pale like the sky, but bright, almost cheerful, as if the whole world had poured its hope into those little shells. I'd peer into a nest and feel a rush of joy, as though I'd been allowed to glimpse a secret miracle. Then there were the mourning doves. Their nests always looked so fragile, barely more than a loose tangle of twigs perched on a ledge or swaying in a maple tree. You'd wonder how the eggs stayed put at all, and yet somehow they did. The eggs were plain white, smooth and simple, almost glowing in the dappled shade. There was something so peaceful about them, fitting for a bird whose call sounded like gentle sorrow drifting across the fields. If I wandered near the old sycamore by the creek, I sometimes found nests of blue jays. Oh, those birds were clever builders. Their nests were thicker, layered with sticks and bark, and lined with roots and bits of grass. The eggs were pale blue or greenish, freckled with brown spots, as if painted by hand. I learned quickly to keep my distance, for the jays were fierce defenders. If they caught you looking too long, they'd scold and swoop until you thought better of it. Still, I admired their courage, their willingness to guard what was theirs. Deeper in the woods, where the pines grew tall and the shadows stretched cool, I sometimes found nests of the eastern phoebe. They liked ledges under bridges or tucked into beams of an old shed. Their eggs were small and white, nestled in mossy cups that looked like they'd been borrowed from the forest floor. Those nests always felt humble and homey, as if the phoebes had carried a piece of the woodland inside. Then there were the cardinals. Their nests were built in shrubs or dense thickets, woven with leaves, twigs, and even bits of paper or string if they could find them. The eggs were delicate ovals, whitish or pale green, sprinkled with soft brown or lavender speckles. To see those eggs and imagine the flash of red the father bird would soon bring to the branches nearby always stirred something bright in me. It was as though the eggs already carried the color of the songs waiting to be sung. One of my most exciting finds came near the orchard, where a black-capped chickadee had chosen a hollow in an old apple tree. Their eggs were tiny, white with reddish-brown flecks, laid on a bed of soft moss and fur. I had to stand on tiptoe to peek inside, and I can still feel the thrill of spotting those speckled jewels tucked away in the dark. There was such tenderness in the way the nest was lined, as though every scrap of down and fiber had been carefully chosen. Occasionally, if I was lucky, I'd stumble across the hidden nests of killdeer right in the open fields. They never bothered with trees or branches, preferring to lay their eggs on bare ground among stones and gravel. The eggs were sandy-colored, dotted with black and brown, so well camouflaged that you'd nearly step on them if you weren't careful. And the parents, oh, how clever they were. If I came too close, one would feign a broken wing, fluttering along the ground to lure me away. I was always amazed by that bravery, such small creatures willing to risk themselves for their young. Of course, I never touched the eggs. I knew better than that. It was enough to look, to marvel, and then to leave them be. They were treasures of the woods and fields, delicate promises that didn't belong to me. I felt honored just to have seen them, to have shared in that small moment of life unfolding. Every species carried its own story. The robins with their bold blue, the doves with their quiet white, the jays with their speckles of brown, the cardinals with their pastel freckles, the chickadees with their tiny flecked pearls, and the killdeer with their clever camouflage. Each nest was a lesson in patience, ingenuity, and the many ways life finds to protect itself. I think those early wanderings taught me to respect the fragile things, to understand that beauty often comes hidden, tucked in a crook of a branch, or laid bare in the open field where it blends with the stones. You learn to look closely, to notice, to care. And in return, the land gives you these small glimpses of wonder, enough to carry in your heart for years to come. Just as the birds made their homes in tree branches and hollows, there was another kind of tree that shaped my memories, one that gave more than shelter. The old plum tree, with its branches heavy with fruit in summer, comes back to me now, and with it a whole season of sweetness. Sometimes, as I was poking about in the hedges looking for nests, my path would take me right past the edge of our orchard. At the very heart of it stood the old plum tree. It wasn't the tallest tree, nor the prettiest, by most standards, but to me it was the soul of the place. Its branches twisted like old hands, reaching out in every direction, gnarled with age and full of secrets. The bark was dark and rough, almost black in places, but when the sunlight hit it just right, you could see silvery streaks running through it like veins of light. In spring, before any of the apples or pears even dared to bloom, the plum tree would burst into clouds of white blossoms. It seemed almost magical how suddenly they appeared, one day bare and gray, the next day dressed in white, as if snow had fallen only on that one tree. The air would be sweet with the smell of the flowers, and the bees would come buzzing, so many that you could hear the hum from a few steps away. I used to stand beneath it and tilt my face up, letting the petals drift down onto my hair when the breeze shook them loose. It felt like standing in the middle of a gentle, fragrant snowfall. By summer, the blossoms gave way to green fruit that swelled slowly, almost shyly, until they ripened into the deepest shade of purple. Some plums were nearly black. Others had a dusty bloom that made them look like they'd been kissed by mist. When they were ready, the branches sagged low under the weight, and you could smell their sweetness even before you reached the tree. Oh, and the taste! There's nothing quite like biting into a sun-warmed plum, juice running down your chin while the cicadas sing all around you. I'd gather baskets full for my mother to make jam, though not before sneaking one or two for myself. She would simmer them down with sugar, filling the house with the rich, tangy scent, and later we'd spread that jam thick on warm biscuits. Even in the middle of winter, when the snow lay heavy on the ground, one spoonful of that jam could bring back the golden days of summer. The plum tree wasn't just for fruit, though. It was a place of play and rest. In its shade, I'd sit with a book or a doll, the grass cool beneath me even on the hottest afternoons. Sometimes, when the sun set just right, the branches would cast long, finger-like shadows across the orchard, and the whole place would feel almost enchanted. It was a fine tree for climbing, too, if you were careful. The lower branches were strong and wide, perfect for small hands and bare feet. I'd scramble up to my favorite spot and sit quietly, hidden among the leaves, watching the world go by. From up there, I could see the tops of the fields, the winding creek beyond, and even the roof of our house glinting through the trees. Birds loved the plum tree as much as I did. In spring, robins would build their nests among its branches, weaving twigs and bits of grass into neat little cups. Later in the season, goldfinches and sparrows would flit about, snatching up tiny insects drawn to the ripening fruit. Sometimes a woodpecker would come visiting, tapping at the old bark with sharp, rhythmic pecks that echoed across the orchard. On still evenings, when the light was soft and golden, I'd sit quietly under the tree and watch them, feeling as if I were part of something much bigger and more mysterious than myself. Even when a tree grew old and began to show its age, losing a branch here and there to storms, it remained a steadfast friend. Its roots ran deep, holding it firm against the wildest winds, and I often thought there was wisdom in those weathered limbs. Standing beneath it, I felt connected to every season that had passed, every memory held in the rings of its trunk. As fall came and the last of the plums were gathered, the leaves would turn a bright, fiery red before drifting to the ground. I always felt a little pang seeing it bare again, but I knew it was only resting, gathering strength for another year. That tree taught me patience and the quiet cycles of life. One day, as I was raking leaves beneath its branches, my eyes wandered to the edge of the orchard where the field opened up into a wild stretch of meadow. That meadow was where the wildflowers grew thickest, and that brings back another memory. One of long afternoons spent gathering little treasures with stained hands and grass-streaked knees. I can still see that meadow in my mind, stretching out like a sea of color beneath the wide, open sky. It wasn't planted or tended by anyone. It simply belonged to the earth, changing its hues with the seasons, a living quilt stitched together by nature's hand. In spring, when the air was damp and cool, the first to appear were the dandelions, dotting the grass with cheerful yellow heads. They were like little suns scattered across the field. I'd pick a handful, knowing that before long they'd turn to soft white puffballs that I could blow into the wind, sending wishes drifting on the breeze. By late spring and into summer, the meadow would come alive with wildflowers of every shape and shade. There were black-eyed Susans with their bright golden petals circling dark, velvety centers, standing tall and proud like little sentinels. Purple coneflowers grew nearby, their petals drooping gracefully like dancers frozen mid-twirl. Queen Anne's lace was one of my favorites, delicate and lacy, with tiny white blooms that looked like they had been crocheted by the fairies themselves. If you looked closely at the center of each cluster, you'd sometimes see a single deep red floret, like a secret heart hidden among the white. Along the edges of the meadow, where the grasses grew higher, wild lupins bloomed in tall spires, their blossoms shading from deep indigo at the base to pale lavender at the tips. I always thought they looked like little towers fit for tiny forest creatures. And then there were the milkweeds, with their dusky pink clusters of blooms that drew butterflies by the dozens. Monarchs, in particular, seemed to dance around them, their orange and black wings flashing brightly as they flitted from flower to flower. In midsummer, the air would grow heavy with the mingled scents of clover and goldenrod. The clover was soft and sweet-smelling, with little round blossoms in shades of white and pink. I'd often make chains from them, threading the stems together to wear like necklaces or crowns. Goldenrod, on the other hand, blazed like fire along the far edges of the field, its feathery yellow plumes waving gently in the breeze. Bees adored it, and I could always hear their steady hum when I drew near. Collecting those flowers felt like gathering pieces of magic. I'd wander barefoot through the grasses, the blades cool against my ankles, with an old woven basket swinging from my arm. Some days I'd pick just a few, arranging them carefully in a jar back at the house, while other days I'd return with my basket brimming over, the colors tumbling together like a rainbow spilled from the sky. The smell of crushed petals and green stems would cling to my hands long after I'd set the flowers in water. There were a few spots in that meadow I kept secret, places where rare little blooms hid among the more common ones. Trilliums, with their three-petaled flowers, appeared in shady corners, pure white or sometimes blushed pink. Wild violets peeked out close to the ground, their tiny faces shy but vivid, deep purple and soft blue. And if I was very lucky, I might stumble upon a patch of wild columbine, their nodding red and yellow flowers like lanterns glowing under the leaves. The meadow changed as the year rolled on. By late summer, the grasses grew tall and whispery, turning a tawny gold that shimmered in the sunlight. The flowers began to fade, their seeds carried away by the wind to begin the cycle anew. Even as the colors dimmed, there was beauty in the way the stalks swayed, and in the rustling song they made when the breeze swept across them. I never left that meadow without feeling richer than when I'd entered. My hands might have been full of blossoms, but it was my heart that was truly overflowing. Each bouquet I carried home seemed to hold not just flowers, but the laughter of my childhood, the endless summer skies, and the deep, quiet peace of being part of something wild and free. Even now, when I see a single wildflower by the roadside, it brings me back to those warm afternoons and to the simple joy of discovery. And as the memories of the fox, the mushrooms, the bird nests, the plum tree, and those fields of flowers gather in my mind, they remind me of the threads that weave a life together. Small, ordinary moments that, when tied side by side, form a tapestry of love and wonder. And so, as the fire burns low and the last of the tea cools in our cups, I sit here with you, my dear, grateful for the chance to wander back through those meadows of memory. Tomorrow will come soon enough, but tonight we've had the quiet gift of stories, and in my heart I believe that's something worth carrying with us wherever we go.